I'd just like to say Bajadi Gamarua Gada Galiora and good day and welcome to everyone. As I understand, it's a very important subject matter today that touches many families and many communities. And when you think about it, substance abuse is associated with trauma and self-medication. When you think about it, that we need to address the facts of people's trauma, how they've come by it, and give them the right services in a wraparound way that they can become fully functioning members of our society. We shouldn't be putting blocks or barriers in their way, and we should be understanding that, prosecution or persecution isn't a way forward. You know, we have had a difficult couple of years, haven't we? And I think with the pandemic, it's brought to fore many things like, DFE, and substance abuse too, and people did medicate themselves through the pandemic, because it was a very traumatic time. You had everyone in lockdowns, and we also had curfews, didn't we? From 9 o'clock at night till 5, I think it was in the morning. I was in the curfew zone. It wasn't pleasant, one might say. I could tell when it was 8 o'clock at night because I could hear the helicopter starting. No matter what time I woke up at night, I could hear the helicopter. I think the world was all locked down at one stage, wasn't it? And we've still got a ways to go through this. It's important we do take a moment of silence to pay respects to ancestors, as all cultures do. It's important to pay respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander traditioners, elders and custodians of the past, present and future, for looking after country, looking after culture and our sites. And our culture and our sites is your culture and sites to protect humanity itself. Whether you're naturalised or born Australian, it's your responsibility. And we need to care for Mother Earth, and we need to remember her, and we need to reflect our journey here right now and how we care for people within our communities. And it's so important. I was lucky in the pandemic to, you may have heard this before, to have the opportunity to see a little community of ibises, which are very beautiful, graceful birds. It's important that we do respect our totems. That is just one of them. Barani the whale is part of the Gadigal totems, in the harbour there you'll see. Dinawan is an emu totem, central New South Wales. We need to protect them, and our sites are like 40,000 years old. Just the Barwarana fish traps is one. Many different sites that need to protect. And let's just have a moment's silence and a moment of paying respect and reflect, and also acknowledging those we've lost along the way, not only through the pandemic, but through every year that we live. We have those three beautiful, wonderful rivers that are the boundaries of the Eora Nation. We have the Hawkesbury, Nepean and Georges, which are a very important part of who we are when you think about it. And the rivers, we're connected to all the water because we are on a blue planet. On behalf of Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, our elders and members, welcome everyone here today. It's a very important conversation happening here. It just makes sense to have a drug summit, I think, from my personal perspectives. And we'd like to welcome any of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander brothers and sisters from their country, clan, tribe and nation to all our brothers and sisters, and we are all brothers and sisters belonging to that one big tribe, humanity. We welcome you from your community, your family, your neighbourhood, ultimately the country you come from, sharing a little blue sphere floating through the ever-expanding cosmos. Let's help people by bringing them back into society with wraparound services and understanding we have health issues, and trauma is underneath a lot of the issues that we have in our communities. And remember that dysfunctions and DFE are not restricted to any postcode. They're in every postcode. We need to remember these things. And that we can always do better. We can always do better with our communities and that. So I'll leave you with those thoughts. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land, never ceded. We have the festive season coming up. I wish everyone to have a great time. Remember, it's only a short lockdown with your family. at Christmas. You know all the idiosyncrasies by now. So I know you love them, and let's all have a bit more love in the world. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone, and a big thank you to Michael for coming and welcoming us to these beautiful lands of the Gadigal people. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians as well on your behalf and my own, to pay respect and express deep gratitude to all elders, and particularly acknowledge First Nations people who are in the room with us today, including Michael, who's given us that lovely welcome and appreciation about what we're all here for. My name's Tracy Burton, and I'm the Chief Executive of Uniting for New South Wales and ACT. I'm wearing my lovely ribbon today because 5 years ago I was commissioned by the Uniting Church to be the leader of Uniting, and I can't tell you how proud we at Uniting are to be part of the Uniting Church, this church which is so determined to be committed to social justice, to changing situations and systems that trap people in cycles of disadvantage. And focusing today on fair treatment is certainly part of that endeavour. I am really pleased to be welcoming you all, and it's amazing to see such a full room. We're here to have our wonderful event to reflect on the 99ers. So the lessons that we can learn from the 1999 Drug Summit. I definitely want to acknowledge the members of Parliament that are in with us here today. I hope you get some food. We know some of you need to come and go. We're so grateful. There's too many of you to actually name. But we do have special guests. We have our speakers for today, and all of you are most welcome. I'd particularly like to welcome the representatives from our Fair Treatment partners. We have over 70 partners in the Fair Treatment campaign, and many of them are represented here today. And of course, we have the Honourable. We were going to have the Honourable Ryan Park MP, so our Minister for Health and Regional Health. Unfortunately, just 10 minutes ago, we had word that he's not going to make it. But we're so grateful that Dr. Michael Holland is here in his stead, and so Michael's going to speak with us. And we're also really grateful that the Honourable Matt Keane, of course, our Shadow Health Minister, is here with us today, and will speak shortly too. Today we're going to go down a bit of a trip down memory lane to look back at what happened over those 5 important days in 1999. What were the lessons? What were the challenges? What went well? What could have been better? We're honoured to have the Honourable Bob Carr and the Honourable Carmen Tebbit, who were both there. We also had John Brogden AM joining us today as well, but unfortunately this morning he let us know that he is unwell, and we all know you can't come out when you're unwell these days. But these fantastic leaders were there in 1999 and are going to share their insights. We can't go forward without acknowledging and expressing our sincere condolences, Bob, for your wonderful wife, Helena. We're so sorry for your loss, but it's enormously important and appreciated that you are here with us today, so thank you. Today we're also going to be joined by Alex Greenwich MP, of course, member of Sydney, and he's going to share his thoughts about a drug summit for 2024. And then we'll wrap up the day with a panel of esteemed individuals, all of whom were at the summit in 1999, and they represent politics, health, harm reduction, lived experience, and they're going to share their thoughts and reflections. Uniting in our Fair Treatment campaign has particular interest in that drug summit in 1999 because it was then that New South Wales took an incredibly courageous and bold decision that was the right decision, and that was to establish the Medically Supervised Injecting Centre at King's Cross, amongst other reforms that came out of that important summit. Since then, this year, Uniting MSIC, so Medically Supervised Injecting Centre, has celebrated 23 years of service to the local community. Our 21st birthday a couple of years ago was very special because the Mayor very honourably gave us a key to the city at MSIC, which was quite extraordinary. So since the service opened in 2001, the centre's staff have supervised over 1.2 million visits. And there have been 11,200 overdoses, but not a single fatality. This was life-changing social policy that these courageous leaders took in 1999 following that drug summit. Also at that centre, what's happened is there have been 22,000 referrals for various forms of support, health support, other welfare support, to try and help people on their journey. Really, I think the MSIC actually represents the embodiment of smart, compassionate, effective, fair health and social policy. It's a wonderful example. And really, having MSIC as part of Uniting Services has made us very passionate about this space, and this led to our Fair Treatment campaign. So the Fair Treatment campaign came from the Uniting Church. It came from a resolution of the Synod of the New South Wales and ACT. And it has two main ambitions. One is to see the decriminalisation of personal use and possession of drugs, and the other is to see increased investment in treatment. The Church made the decision to campaign for and support drug law reform because it recognises that people we serve are whole human beings. They're not broken. They are deserving of dignity and respect, and their lives are inherently valuable. It is fundamental to our mission of welcoming people exactly as they are. The Uniting Church and Uniting and our Fair Treatment partners, we all acknowledge the work of previous New South Wales governments, of the previous government, and with the ICE inquiry, as well as the recent announcement by the current New South Wales government of the two-strike diversion scheme. Any positive change to the way we approach drug use and dependency in Australia is always welcome, but we do think that there is more that New South Wales can do. The ACT has just taken an evidence-based approach and shown a willingness to act in line with community values and support people and treat drug use as the health and social policy issue that it is. Additionally, the Queensland Government has also just recently committed to drug checking and exploring the expansion of the drug diversion scheme there for all drugs. We are eagerly awaiting the next steps in New South Wales, and we think that that needs to be a 5-day parliamentary drug summit in 2024. It's going to centre around lived experience, hearing from experts, academics, family members and communities about what changes are needed. We do see this as an exciting opportunity for New South Wales. We want New South Wales to be back at the forefront again, as it was with MSIC and those other changes that were made after the last drug summit. So sensible, effective, compassionate, fair drug policy. And that's what we think. And judging by the number of people in this room, it seems like lots of other people think so too. So thank you again for being here. I'm now going to hand over to Dr. Michael Holland, Parliamentary Secretary for Health and Regional Health, to speak on behalf of our Minister. Thank you, Michael, very much for being here.
Thank you, Tracy. I'd firstly like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're gathered on here today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. Thank Michael for the welcome to country. I'm proud to represent the various tribes of the Yuin Nation from Durras Lake down to the Victorian border, and people who share with the rest of our community the problems of drug and alcohol abuse. At the last minute, I have received the role to deputise for the Minister for Health, the Honourable Ryan Park, and I must say it's an honour to represent the Minister, but it's also an honour to be at this venue, this forum, and as with my medical background in our training, we say we stand on the shoulders of giants, and the giants of drug reform in New South Wales are present in this room. So I'd like to acknowledge the Honourable Bob Carr, Honourable Carmel Tebbit, my parliamentary colleagues, who I'll run out of names, but Matt Keane, the Shadow Minister for Health, is here, and we await Alex Greenwich. And thank you, Tracy, and the Uniting team and all the various panellists and guests. I want to recognise, as everyone does, the incredible work that Uniting does in reducing drug-related harms in New South Wales. The 1999 Drug Summit, and some of us were a little bit older when that happened, nearly 25 years ago. It was a watershed moment in Australian drug policy, and it brought together a wide range of voices to tackle this very complex issue. It generated 20 general principles and 172 resolutions prioritising harm reduction over a criminal justice response. And these outcomes were significant. For the first time, drug-related harm was actually recognised as a health issue, and I can recognise this as a medical professional. And of course, we had our world first medically supervised injecting centre, which was established, and I acknowledge my contemporary over there from uni, Dr. Ingrid Van Beek. We also saw diversion programs, including the Magistrates Early Referral into Treatment programs and Cannabis Cautioning Scheme, establishing diversion from people from the criminal justice system. And we also, it was also established that school education programs. So more than 20 years has gone, and our community still benefits from all these reforms. I'll reiterate the statistics of having managed over 10,860 overdoses without a single fatality. And if you could quantify harm reduction, there is no greater harm reduction than saving lives. Additionally, the people that were given referrals to ongoing care and support, including treatment services, were significant. And this put us as a state as a global leader in drug policy at that time. But there's still work to be done, still widespread harms. There is alcohol and other drug use still in our communities, and we acknowledge that all individuals, families and communities in New South Wales who are impacted by alcohol and other drug use. And I've personally openly spoken in the chamber of the generational effect of alcoholism on my late father and my late brother. So as a government, we intend to drive further change. We can't do that without significant partnerships across government and with the non-government sector and community. And of course, recognise all those who work tirelessly in this room and outside to reduce drug-related harms, treat clients with dignity and respect, and support the families of those loved ones who are battling drug use. 1999 was a time to listen to key voices. We want to do the same as a government. It will bring a new summit next year, will bring together medical experts, legal experts, law enforcement agencies, people with lived experience and other stakeholders to find a consensus on the way New South Wales deals with drugs and its harm in this decade and going forward. We need to listen and connect to people who have lived or living experience and ensure that their voices are heard so that we better understand the challenges that they face and we better know how to help other people. And this is a great priority. I want to thank the Honourable Matt Keane for his presence today and Alex Greenwich, which indicates that non-partisan support speaks volumes to communities and shows that irrespective of politics, we can agree that there are significant harms caused by drugs that need to be addressed. The 1999 Drug Summit brought together a broad range of voices across government, academia and the community, and we will commit to this again at the upcoming summit because we know that this is the key to creating real change and improving outcomes. We're going to build on the foundations of the 1999 summit. We're in a different climate in 1999. We now have established and effective harm reduction services that we didn't have then, like the medically supervised injection centre, court diversions programs, and widely accessible needle exchange programs. We want to learn and build upon this work, and we're also looking at implementing the important recommendations from the Special Commission of Inquiry into the Drug ICE. We don't have to go, don't worry. $358 million over 4 years has been allocated to New South Wales Health to address gaps and improve health and social outcomes, and this funding is going to go where it's most needed. Funding is also allocated to the Department of Communities and Justice to expand access to diversion programs, including Magistrates Early Referral into Treatment and Drug Court. And these programs illustrate the value of health and justice working in partnership to deliver better outcomes. The implementation of the inquiry's recommendations is just one example of the many initiatives across New South Wales to address alcohol and other drug abuse. The upcoming summit will complement and build on the significant work being done across New South Wales to address alcohol and other drug-related harms. It will focus on ways we progress our successes to date, but also how we improve our policies, programs and services to change and improve people's lives. The 1999 Drug Summit showed it was possible to make meaningful change to those affected by drug use. With the upcoming summit, we will do it again. Thank you for those who are here today. I look forward to hearing from you in the forum and the interviews and engaging with you on this very important topic.
Thank you, Michael. That is very, very encouraging to hear of the plans. It is now my pleasure to introduce the Honourable Matt Keane, Shadow Minister for Health and Member for Hornsby. Welcome, Matt. There you are.
Well, thank you, Tracy, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can I also begin in acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Can I thank the Uniting Church, or Uniting New South Wales and ACT, for inviting me to speak, and also the Fair Treatment Campaign for convening the event. Can I acknowledge representing the Minister for Health, Dr. Michael Holland, as Parliamentary Secretary for Health in New South Wales, my various parliamentary colleagues from right across the political spectrum, Carmel Tebbit, and a person I think is one of the finest people that's ever led this state, my friend Bob Carr. It's great to see you here, Bob. Thank you for all you've done. And what you did at the 99 Drug Summit is an example to all of us in public life about vision, courage and leadership and what it looks like. So thank you so much, Bob. It's important for me to reflect on the diversity of people, MPs in particular, that are here today, because a multi-partisan approach to this event is absolutely crucial. I'm a firm believer that on big and complex issues, there will be good ideas found right across our parliament, right across our community. And where we can achieve consensus and common ground, the solutions that we arrive at will be more durable. This was certainly the approach of Bob Carr in convening the original Drug Summit in 1999. He brought together experts and advocates from across civil society, including health, law enforcement, and the criminal justice systems. The summit was guided by two principles above all: an abiding belief in evidence and an exclusive focus on what worked. Bob Carr rightly describes the results that followed: the lives saved, and the communities made safe, as among his crowning achievements in office, and can I say, rightly so. Now that would not have been possible as well without the multi-partisan support that he received from MPs right across the Parliament and from members right across the community, particularly at a time that was environmentally charged on the right of politics in particular. And Bob, I'm sure, will speak to that in a moment. But there was another lesson from the 1999 summit that we have to keep in mind as we approach the next one. We should have zero regard for the pernicious and greedy motivations of those criminals that sit at the apex of the drug trade. But where we can find smart and sensible ways to assist those caught in the cycle of misery that follows, we should seize them. We need to think carefully about ways to ensure that a small mistake does not permanently limit a person's pursuit of a life of dignity and liberty. I'm also conscious of another obligation that we have in drawing a distinction between those behind the drug trade and those affected by it. As Shadow Minister for Health, I understand that there are nurses, ambulance officers, and other frontline staff in our health system who confront overdoses on a daily basis. As a local MP, I hear from police in my community on the dangers of confronting someone trapped by addiction. And I've seen other frontline service workers dealing with the consequences of family breakdown, mental health, and other effects. So we should explore prudent measures to ease the burden on them. And I look forward to working with the Minister for Health, the government, and all my parliamentary colleagues, and all of you here in this room here today, to ensuring that the upcoming drug summit is just as successful as the one we saw in 1999, and that we ensure we deliver on those objectives, to ensure people afflicted by addiction are able to live a full life of dignity and promise. And that's my promise here to you today. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Matt, and for bringing that, reminding us of the importance of the multipartisan approach. Thank you. So if I could ask Bob Carr and Carmel Tebbit to come up here to the front, grab a microphone, I'm hoping they're on. I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Emma Maiden. I'm the General Manager of Advocacy and External Relations here at Uniting. And I'm going to be convening our political panel here of those that were there at the 99 summit. And it is a shame that John Brogden is unwell and is unable to join us today, and that he sends his apologies. But it's my pleasure to introduce Bob Carr, former Premier of New South Wales. Matt Keane did a fabulous job of introducing him much more capably than I can earlier on. And of course, Carmel Tebbit, the former Minister for Health here in New South Wales, as well as the former Deputy Premier, and she's currently the CEO of Odyssey House. So we're having this political panel to have some reflections on the 99 summit, the what happened, what was heard, what was seen, how it changed, the politicians that were there, their perspectives and their colleagues' understanding about drugs and people who use drugs. So I was hoping to start off with a question, to you, Bob. I mean, you're Premier back then, but how would you describe your kind of 1999 self in relation to the issue of drugs and the mindset that you had coming into the summit? And how did that format, that 5 days closing Parliament, having all the MPs invited, what role did that play in the transformational nature of the summit itself?
A good question, Emma. I think the summit the summit setting was an invitation to look at the evidence, to start with the evidence and probe for better ways of managing something none of us wanted to contemplate, but which was the way we lived. So I think the summit, I was a bit sceptical about it, but the idea of closing the Parliament, inviting outsiders in, inviting people who used illegal substances and giving them a platform, having the experts who toiled in this area for so long, created a very interesting dynamic. And I went in there not expecting that I'd be coming out the other end explaining the case for a medically supervised injection room.
Wow. That wasn't what you thought at all. You'd be taking into that.
No, and when I saw the shift in thinking, and when I had two ministers I greatly respected, John Della Bosco and Craig Knowles, stand before me and say, "Well, this is a proposition." And I contemplated those words, the words they are on a bit of paper. I said, well, I feel pretty queasy at this point, given the revulsion I had at the very thought of heroin. I did begin to grapple with it as a problem of public policy. And I said to them in my office in this building before we went back into the summit, I said, well, hang on, let's take your words and just tweak them. Why don't we say the state government's policy is going to be that we would not block an initiative by a local community to set up a medically supervised injecting space. So that wording, that indirect wording, sidestepped the argument that the people of Cabramatta did not want it. They saw that as stigmatisation. We weren't forcing anything on them. We're simply saying that we're a community like South Sydney, which was putting its hand up to sponsor such a space in King's Cross, wanted to do it. We would not overrule them. And in politics, as in diplomacy, sometimes that little tweak enables you to leap over a barrier.
Carmel, thinking back to 1999, you were a junior minister at the time. What was your mindset and your thinking coming into the summit? What did you feel yourself change over the course of it?
So, is that on? Yes.
Yes.
I was in a very different situation to Bob in that I had just been appointed a minister in March 1999, so I've been in the role for 2 months, heading into a drug summit where I had responsibility for the portfolio of juvenile justice. So it was a very real and pressing concern for me as a newly appointed minister to better understand what would be some of the solutions that could make a difference in the lives of the young people that I was seeing in our juvenile detention centres, whose future opportunities had really almost been destroyed by their engagement with drugs and or alcohol. Now, that wasn't the situation of every young person in juvenile detention, but it was the situation of the vast majority of them. I went into the summit with a good understanding, support, really got that drug use and its impacts were very much a health and a social issue. But here was I with the responsibility for a portfolio where young people were caught up in the criminal justice system. So, it was a challenging period. I had challenging thought processes I had to go through. I was also, like Bob said, a bit sceptical, I guess, at the start, at the idea that we could get all of these people together for 5 days, politicians, experts, lived experience, frontline providers, academics, and that something useful would come out at the end of it. I just thought it sounded, frankly, like a recipe for disaster. And I think that's a great tribute both to the thought that went into organising the summit and also the process that we all went through being a part of that summit and the goodwill that people brought to the room. I mean, that I just found extraordinary. The goodwill from people from all different perspectives on the issues came to that summit hoping to find solutions, and we did.
And what about the issue of bipartisanship? You talked about Della Bosco as being influential in terms of your attitudes to the injecting centre as an outcome. But how did the bipartisanship work during the course of the summit? I mean, obviously there was a range of perspectives there, but how did you feel about that? Was there support or was it...
Yeah, and here's my view of the politics of it. Bob Carr, post-1999 election, had more confidence about selling propositions and carrying the electorate with him. I wouldn't have been brave enough to have done this in the previous parliament, but I just went awarded with a big majority in the election campaign. And to go on the ABC 7:30, interviewed by Kerry O'Brien, to stand up to one of the commercial radio performers and to explain what this was and what this wasn't, was something that came with the confidence that having had an election win. And a big majority, my party, to be candid, we're going to follow the leader and senior ministers and ministers on this, senior and junior. But the fact that there were people in the opposition party who were saying, give this a go, John Brogden, for example, even though there were some who were toying with opposition to it, was really of real comfort, and it delegitimised hardliners in the community. In the media, in the tabloid media, for example, we might well say this notorious radical extremist socialist Bob Carr is leading us in a shocking direction. So it was very encouraging because it was hard to portray this as a reckless step. There were people in the coalition who were saying, we need new approaches. So that was very encouraging. And I think, just to press this point in case we miss an opportunity to say it later, that statesman-like statement that Matt King gave is very significant because it's an invitation for another government, another Labor government, to say, well, the community is looking for evidence-based policies that might pass the test, but just the medically supervised injecting room passed. Will it save lives? Will it save lives? And all my wisdom is, listen, you can win an argument by saying candidly to the families of New South Wales, we think this approach will save lives. And you've even got the fallback of saying, as we could with the medically supervised injecting room, it's an experiment, and were it shown in the first year to be, or 2 years to be a disaster, we can recast it.
Carmel, do you remember any unexpected allies in the discussions that you were involved in, either in politics or among the other attendees at the summit?
I certainly think the importance of bipartisan support for initiatives such as these and for changes in terms of drug health policy are absolutely critical, because this sort of social reform can be very difficult, and the community are often somewhat concerned, don't necessarily have access to all the same information that we might sitting in a drug summit with all the experts. And so having the ability of people across the political spectrum to demonstrate that they support change and that they think these initiatives, whether they be in the law reform space or the treatment space or the supply reduction space, that they think these initiatives are important and should be supported, is very, very powerful. And yeah, I do recall that my working group that I was responsible for during the period of time of the 1999 Drug Summit, not surprisingly, was in the youth policy space. And when I turned up to my first meeting of the group during the Drug Summit, I had both John Brogden and Maurice Payne in my working group, along with a number of other people. And I must say, I initially thought this is going to be really challenging, because I'm going to have to be quite careful about how I manage this, and you know, John and Maurice aren't necessarily going to be allies in what I'm trying to achieve and what the summit's trying to achieve. But very quickly I realised how wrong I was. John and Maurice and the rest of the group came to it with the right mindset, wanting to discuss, debate and find ways forward. We didn't all agree, but there was definitely, as I said earlier, that goodwill to try and forge consensus and find a way through our differences.
So it was a long time, 5 days, to set aside for the endeavour. Bob, what made you decide that you were going to shut down Parliament and do it in that particular way? What drove you to that decision?
Yeah, let's not overlook the role of the voluntary sector in driving this onto the agenda. There's hit of civil resistance, King's Cross saying King's Cross saying, well, look, the government's not going to do it. We will provide a medically supervised space. We'll do it. And I mean, that's an example of the creative use of a challenge to the state. What are you going to do? You could bring me to think, I'm going to send in the police to close this down. So that put it on the agenda. It forced us in the election campaign to say, well, we'll be a summit on this, we'll explore everything. And having said that, I wanted to deliver and said to the election campaign that stated with the seriousness it deserves. And bear this in mind, this is an area where the policy of state governments dominates the landscape. What could John Howard do? John Howard preached overrule in the ACT any dinner approach on drugs. But the federal government couldn't stop us doing it. I mean, I think John, with very conservative instincts, that we rounded over the years, what would have done it if he had the power. But this was one area where the states still had decisive power. Why not really got decisive power? And you think you might get a better policy approach, why not throw everything into it? But I give credit to the people, Carl just reminded me of this, who structured it, the professionals who structured it, from the voluntary sector and from the public service. The structure, you just referred to it, the group you were chairing, was very well designed. I don't think you could, it'd be hard to point to another area of public engagement in policy making as good as this, and the fact that you had Maurice Payne and John Brogdon showed it was an authentic effort to involve both sides. So, I mean, if you want, I'm one of the people think this 99 initiative is a useful model. And it is. I mean, it took Victoria, nearly 20 years to have one at Richmond, and the evidence piled up, the deaths and the degradation, make the case as strongly of what had been happening at King's Cross did for us.
Yeah. And for Carmel, what really stood out for you? What were the one or two things that over the 5 days, really stuck in your mind?
I think that extraordinary opportunity to hear from such a range of different voices, lending their knowledge, understanding and expertise to how we could implement reform that could assist people who were using drugs and had huge issues. I just found that unbelievably powerful. I mean, some of the experts were just so knowledgeable. And as I said, I went into the summit feeling like I had already a pretty clear understanding of what my views were and what needed to be done, but I really didn't have an appreciation of the complexity and challenges and difficulties, and I got that throughout the summit. And I really remember Justice James Woods, who at that stage I think was still on the Supreme Court, and he made an address, I think it was on the second last day, he was sort of doing a summing up, and just the way he talked so powerfully about what he saw in his court and the links between poverty, drug use, life of crime, getting caught up in that cycle. And I remember him so clearly saying, if any of us think there's a simple, single solution to dealing with this, then we're kidding ourselves. There really isn't. And what we need is a comprehensive plan that looks at all facets of this issue. And I think hearing it from him was just very, very powerful and persuasive perhaps for the audience. And it really stayed in my mind that someone that senior with such a job as he had was able to speak so clearly about what needed to be done. I remember that very strongly.
So in terms of looking to the next summit, hopefully next year, Bob, what are you hoping to see as the kind of father of the New South Wales Drug Summit? What would you like to see coming out of the next drug summit? What's the next injecting centre, the next big outcome or reform?
I think a relentless focus on the evidence. What is the evidence showing us about the most damaging behaviour currently? And what's the world's best practice in better managing it than we are? And a sifting of the priorities. But I think government should be bold but just intelligent about moving with the community. 5 years ago I addressed a group of managers from the insurance sector, and it was a time when the issue of testing pills at dance parties was in the news. And it was a bit young, you might be 500 people. I assume that working in the insurance sector, in middle management, that'd be pretty conservative. And you said, look, I'm interested in your views. If your son or daughter is going to be at a dance party on Saturday night, would you live with them having an opportunity to have the drug that's surreptitiously secured tested? And the hands went up. I put it very fairly. I wasn't edging the to a yes vote. The hands went up overwhelmingly. They're just pragmatic. And it's like the winning argument that the medically supervised injecting route, sure, I would say to critical people on commercial radio or elsewhere. Sure, I'm not saying this is a satisfactory solution, but nothing to do with this addictive white powder is satisfactory. I'm just saying it can be seen as the least bad outcome. People are using the drug, but we're keeping them alive until the point they reach in their life where finding a partner or finding a religious faith, or just, as this was explained to me by one of the experts, or just getting sick, just getting tired of the daily struggle to marshal the money and buy more stuff, wanting to have a different life. They decide to get off it. But in the meantime, we're saying, while they're hooked on it, they go to this space where there are paramedics on hand. And the other argument was very useful, was to say, this is something that's good for the paramedics. They don't have to risk needle stick injury going into the car parks and alleyways at King's Cross. So I think mobilising pragmatic arguments, say, yeah, the least worst solution here, and then taking up again the offer that Matt King put down. There's bipartisanship available on this, and just understanding that, like those people that at that insurance conference I was addressing, people will listen to an argument that as their youngster is going through a phase where they're taking risks, please make saving their lives your highest priority. One thing I learned, and I was too ready to do it, I think, when I was in my political career, was removing any hint of stigma of people who are using drugs. Respect. This is the case where you disrespect common humanity, and who can judge others? We don't know their lives. We don't know what has driven them. In that spirit, find a chance to just push the boundaries and run this test. There's a render more likely that you're going to save a life rather than risk it.
Well, thank you, Bob. And we're going to have to leave it there. I'm afraid we've run out of time. So if I could just ask everyone to thank both Bob and Carmel for their leadership and wisdom on this issue. Thank you.
And thank you also, Emma, for providing questions that drew out such incredible wisdom on which we can draw in order to make sure it is a really well-designed drug summit that gets those inspirational outcomes. It's now my pleasure to introduce Alex Greenwich, who is here as the member for Sydney, to let us know about his thoughts for next year and the drug summit. Welcome, Alex.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Can I also join those before me in acknowledging the traditional owners of the land and pay my respects to elders past and present. Can I thank our former Premier Bob Carr and former Deputy Premier Carmel Tebbit for those really encouraging insights into the 99 Drug Summit. That gives us a great deal of hope going into a drug summit that I hope will be held next year in this Parliament. Can I also acknowledge my predecessor, the Lord Mayor of Sydney, Clover Moore, and thank her for her leadership then in 99 and her leadership today when it comes to drug law reform and harm minimisation. And importantly, in terms of next year's drug summit, can I thank and acknowledge all of my parliamentary colleagues that are here today. The goodwill shown puts us in a really good place to have a multi-partisan approach to the drug summit, which will deal with many controversial and contentious issues. And can I thank all the people from the sector that are here and uniting for putting this forum on today for us all to be educated and learn. So I've been asked to talk about my hopes for the drug summit. At the outset, let me say, I intend to follow my predecessor's lead and use it as an opportunity to push the envelope, to facilitate discussion, but also to force outcomes. Just as Clover put a vote on an injecting centre, a vote up to the floor, I intend to look for those opportunities to progress and see real decisions made at that drug summit. That's critically important. I also want to make sure that all of my colleagues and I all approach the drug summit with a real open mind, that we are able to really consider the evidence. For me, I know the open mind I need to approach the Drug Summit with is to get a real understanding of the challenges in rural and regional New South Wales around access to rehabilitation service, to understand what the addiction issues are like in those settings outside of the inner city. And I hope my colleagues are able to show an open mind to the lived experience of people in the inner city, and that we are able to share a common understanding. What we need from the sector is a great deal of patience. I'm the only member of Parliament with a medically supervised injecting centre in it, right? We'll have to appreciate that some members are going to take a bit more time. Some members are going to need a bit more education, information and evidence, and that this is the window to be able to achieve that. I know it is so frustrating that we have not had major reforms really since the 99 Drug Summit. But let's not dwell on the frustrations. Let's look for the opportunities. And I am sure they will be there. I really feel the top line item that needs to be on the table for the next New South Wales Parliament Drug Summit will be pill testing or drug checking. We know that we have a model underway already in the ACT, that just this last weekend at the Spilt Milk Festival saw 150 young people have a connection with someone who was able to educate them on the substance that they could be about to consume. We have to learn from that. And as the former Premier Bob Carr said, we need to look at evidence on reforms that will save lives. I'm confident that the evidence is there that drug checking or pill testing will save lives, but I need to let you know that not all my colleagues are. So we're going to need patience in this process to educate, inform and show how such a model works, show how important it is to connect a young person with someone who can tell them about the potential impacts of something they are about to ingest could be. I'm also really looking forward to seeing the next Drug Summit as an opportunity to celebrate the work of the Medically Supervised Injecting Centre. There is nothing in my electorate that I am more proud of than MSIC. When international visitors from other parliaments come, I take them to MSIC. There are very few places, potentially other than hospitals, where every day lives are saved and lives are changed. We often focus on the overdoses that have been prevented, the lives that have been saved at the MSIC, but what we don't often hear outside of those stats is the community that has been built around it, the way in which people have been able to access not only support services, but really a family-like environment that supports them. So I want to look at the opportunities to be able to achieve that. Importantly, the Drug Summit cannot be a talk fest. And as long as I'm participating in it, I assure you it won't be. And I see many of my parliamentary colleagues here today who have exactly the same view. We need to go into this looking for outcomes. And I think today's forum really sends us into that process with a lot of goodwill. To have the Parliamentary Secretary on behalf of the Minister and the Shadow Minister, Matt King here, talking about that goodwill and talking about that open mind tells us we are very likely to achieve outcomes. So to achieve those outcomes, we're going to need a bit of patience from the sector. We're going to need open minds from my parliamentary colleagues. But if we work together through, and we need to embrace tension, we need to embrace arguments, and we need to look for common ground. And if we're able to do that, we will be able to achieve the same successes that were achieved in the 99 Drug Summit. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to sharing that experience with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. It's always a pleasure to know the support that we receive from you as our local member. So We have a panel coming up, so I'd like to ask my 5 panel members, Annie and Tony and Garth and Clover and Ingrid, to come up and take a microphone and make sure it's turned on. This is the last portion of the day, and it's a chance to hear from some of the individuals that took part in the summit in 1999, for them to give us some thoughtful reflections and insights. They're all impressive individuals and probably known to most of you, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on introductions. But for those of you who don't know, my name's Marianne Jauncey. I'm the director at the Medically Supervised Injecting Centre that Alex was referred to, and as many of you know, it's the best job I've ever had, and I'm pleased and humbled at the people that I work alongside with and the clients that we work with. So, Annie, I think I'm going to start with you. You are a long-term advocate for people who use drugs, and you have a range of leadership positions at a national and an international level. You're the Executive Director of Harm Reduction Australia. You work at Input, the international network for people who use and inject drugs, and you've also completed your doctorate recently about representation at a high policy level of people who use drugs. We've heard about part of what made 1999 so seismic was that it brought people on this journey, and part of that was hearing the personal stories. And your story, I think, is often considered one of those, seismic moments when people heard and listened to you share a story. But it also came at a personal cost. And I was reflecting on some of the comments from Piers Ackerman from, all of those years ago. And so I wondered, one, if you had some reflections about that, the importance of lived experience, but also messages for people who might be listening about how we safely allow people to tell stories and keep you feeling welcome exactly as you are.
Okay, thanks, Marianne. I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners and, sorry, you need me to speak up? Yeah, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and acknowledge that we're on Gadigal land. Yeah, look, I was one of only 2 people who were in the summit as a representative of people who use drugs. I was then the CEO of the New South Wales Youth Association and a while CEO at that. And I had never been into Parliament before. I mean, most people like me probably don't get to go into those environments. I didn't know how it operated. And I have to say, no one actually helped me understand it really before I went in there. So there was some very unexpected things that happened. And one of them was that we were able to stand up and do an intervention, or put your name down for an intervention. And I wasn't planning on doing that really, but on the first day I felt that the way the conversation was heading was not all that helpful. At that time I had decades of injecting drug use. I was on methadone, I still am. I had hepatitis C. I thankfully have cleared that now, but I had a whole lot of reasons to care about what was happening and for my community. And so I decided, and at the insistence of people like Clover next to me and others, to put my name down. And I remember standing there, legs shaking, trying to speak, and Bob was sitting this far away from me, and I got upset when I was talking, because I started to talk about that the thing that is killing most of my community was the criminalisation and the stigma and the discrimination, more so than the drugs themselves, and how sticky stigma is and how it affects everyone around you, including your family. And it seemed to make it was a thing. And I then got rushed into this press conference at which Piers Ackerman was there. And I don't remember a lot of that, but I remember that I was attacked on my mental health grounds because I got upset. But that was evidence that I really, did have mental health problems, and that my drug use had done that to me. And that was basically, I was the subject of a 2-page spread. A couple of days later, you're kidding yourself, Annie, with a fit hanging out of my arm, looking in the mirror, because I was basically kidding myself that I was okay. And, that was a really interesting event because it actually was devastating on a personal level. And I didn't speak to my family for 10 years after that. But, you know, now that's been a very positive thing because we've actually had a much more honest relationship than we've ever had before. But, you know, that was my personal cost that you alluded to. But, you know, what it did in the summit, I think, is a whole lot of people thought, you know, that's not okay that she's being called out on a personal level for just speaking her truth in this place that's meant to be all of our public house, you know, our place. So that in itself was interesting. So what I would say, sorry, I know we don't have a lot of time. So what I would say in terms of the other parts of your question about how do you create a safe space, you know, invite more than one or two of us would be really helpful. I think you need to, you know, resource organisations like you properly beforehand to be able to do the job that they're going to need to do at the next summit and to be able to speak up and to know what they're going into. I didn't even understand that media was in Parliament. I mean, maybe that's silly, but that was the truth of the matter, and it all kind of was on the national news that night, and I was dealing with it before I knew what was happening. So, you know, we need to prepare people for the environment. We need to equip them. We need to give them ways to participate that don't necessarily mean they have to go on the record. Because people, the bottom line is we are a criminalised population. That's the truth, right? And that has all sorts of implications for people taking the risk of speaking up. And particularly if people have children, they can lose their children. There are big stakes for people, right? And so we have to make the safe space for people, the space safe for people, give them ways to participate, alternative ways to participate, give them resources and the community organisations that support the resources up front to be able to get those voices to the summit. And then the other thing I would probably say is about two more things. Be really thoughtful. When you're another participant in the summit, be thoughtful about what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. Don't assume that there are not people in the room who are the people you are talking about. And that we are all brought up from very young to be very disparaging and stereotyping about people who use drugs. And I think it just can tumble out of people's mouths, and it can be a way that really shuts people down and to stop them speaking. So really, you play your part. And if you're not sure what the languages you should use, there are plenty of resources and organisations out there like you are that can help you understand how you should be communicating on these issues, because we do that with lots of other communities. The only other thing I really want to say, and I will finish, is that today I've just heard a lot about drug use, the problematic side of drug use. I just need to say, that drug use is not all about a life of misery. And then people wouldn't do it otherwise, right? I mean, that's one thing to say. But we know from the evidence, the vast majority of drug use is non-problematic drug use. It's drug use that people do for recreation, for fun, for relaxation. They get all sorts of benefits from it, including therapeutic benefits. So let's not just lump everything into one place. Yes, people experience difficulties with their drug use, but that's not everyone. And of course, we can do much better on the issues and the services for people who are experiencing problems, who can't get the help they need. But there is a whole different story out there about drug use, and we have to get our heads around that if we are ever going to get anywhere close to people being able to speak their truth in this environment and being able to get outcomes that are really meaningful for people.
Thank you, Annie. I think your ability to come up with a powerful speech at a moment's notice has definitely not been lost in the last 25 years. Tony, you are the CEO of Family Drug Support, which you created 27 years ago after your own son died, Damien. And you now not only have told your own personal stories, but are taking calls every day from other families that are affected. What is your message about why we need to do something now? Because we've seen some change, but why should we be caring about this now?
Yeah, thank you. And Annie, the majority of drug users I know are fully functioning members of society.
Me too.
the Drug Summit was a watershed. And there are heroes in this room and some outside of this room that made it possible. And it was a privilege to be part of that. And I'm grateful to be here. I just want to correct a couple of things that have been said today, though. The Drug Summit was not bipartisan. The National Party walked out en masse. Members of the coalition were thrown out of their party because they didn't think the same was their party. I listened to Alec Greenwich, and I think that he's got the message right. We can go in bipartisan. We are partisan. We have an opinion. But we can go in with open minds and with the will to do something positive. And that's really what happened in 1999. And I'm glad Bob mentioned John Della Bosca, because I think John Della Bosca, more than anybody, was responsible for what that summit achieved. Now, I am very, very disappointed at what's happened since the 99 summit. We were on the floor of Parliament when those resolutions were passed, and we thought the dominoes were going to fall. We thought this would be the start of radical change. And in one way it was, because we got the AMSIC and we got all the benefit that brought, and we also got treatment, recognition and support for families and a lot of other things. But the dominoes didn't fall. It's 27 years later, and nothing else has happened in New South Wales. We've talked about evidence. The evidence is there. It's overseas. It's in other parts of Australia. We don't really need a bloody summit. We just need to do it. If we have to have a summit, then we'll have one. But honestly, and what brings me here is Damien. Yes, he's always there. But I talk to at least one family every week who've lost someone. When Damien died in 1997, 4 people a day in Australia were dying from drug use. Do you know what's happening today? 4 people are dying. We need to do more. We can do more. We can save more lives. The injecting centre has proved that that can happen, but we need more things. We definitely need drug checking. It's a no-brainer. There's nothing to lose. People will be informed. People will know whether to use the substances they've brought into the festival or not. I spoke at the weekend to 2 people. One was a mother who lost her daughter 10 months ago, and she's in deep grief. I spoke to a young man, Daniel, whose brother died 3 weeks ago. He hasn't stopped crying. This could be anybody's family member, anybody's brother, sister, son, daughter, partner. These deaths don't need to happen. They don't need to happen. We must do everything that we can to stop it happening.
Thank you, Tony. Garth, at the end there, you have been around for a while. You're the Executive Director of WHO's We Help Ourselves, which offers a number of services, including residential treatment under a therapeutic communities model. So you're at the front line in terms of the non-government sector of treatment, and we've heard about different approaches, reducing stigma, reducing criminality. All of that has to be paired with a treatment system that is ready and able to pick up the pieces. There's always a room in a jail, but there's not always a room in a treatment service. What's it like at the front line?
Thanks, Maria. And look, firstly, thank you, Bob, for what you did for the Drug Summit, and Carnival as well, because for us, when we first turned up at the Drug Summit, we were like the poor cousins in town. We were the NGO sector, and we actually found out people in the department who knew what they were talking about. hope it's a back door out of here. But one of the things we found out is that we were bringing experience from the front line and we're hearing about the evidence. And we just come through a situation in 1986 of HIV, and our particular service was being criticised by making available syringes and condoms in a drug-free service. And thanks to people like Alex Wodak and Jennifer Buckup, that we're actually introduced to harm reduction, and we're actually finding out we're there for the person, not for the person who got drug-free by our standards or our ideology. So it was great for us because we were mixing with local members, researchers, what have you. And I think it was great what happened at the drug summit, but and it was well run, the communique was great, but when it came down to the financial impact of each recommendation and how it was rolled out, I guess I couldn't be here today without making some comment about the shortcomings, just like Tony was talking about. The shortcomings that we saw, that I know for an NGO service like us, we've got 300 beds. I think we've got 9 beds out of the drug summit. And the thing I would jump forward to, what I would want to see again is what happened to the ICE Commission money that was rolled out. I mean, honestly, $500 million, and I didn't even tell anyone I was going to talk about this, but I could walk in the door without people complaining about the share that the non-government sector got of that. Now, I know in my service, we've got 65% of people, that's 300 beds, and got day programs that actually identified ice and amphetamine as their primary drug of concern. And when you bring in the secondary drug, it goes up to about 95%. How much should we get from the ICE Commission? 0. One of the biggest problems we've got in this sector, what did get rolled out was new initiatives. We always love an announcement about a new initiative. But, you know, like the hole in the boat's starting to rust out. Our infrastructure, our non-government sector is rusting out. We're good at putting new deck chairs on and painting a new room, but we're not very good at backing up and putting money into the infrastructure. Like for us, like we do probably 80% of the people who are presenting who want treatment for ice and other complex needs. Nothing is coming into the infrastructure for this group of people. We need this drug summit. You know, I get concerned when I hear $500 million. What's this drug summit going to put into it? I hope it puts a big lion's share for non-government sector this time, because we're actually withering away and the decay is starting to set in. Rolling forward, I love what was said about the pill testing, and I love what's being said about decriminalisation, because it's coming whether people like it or not, just like with the needle syringe condoms, opiate treatment in the old days, it's coming. But when you look at jurisdictions overseas, it's got to be done right. You've got to have your social services in place. You've got to have your treatment in place for people who are going to need that extra support. So I encourage you when you're going that road to actually start thinking about what's coming down the turnpike. I'll finish on this. I've got 3 questions for you to think about. How much of the $500 million allocated to implement the recommendations for the ICE Commission report will be utilised or was utilised for ICE users? Second one is, what impact will the 2024 New South Wales Drug Summit actually have on individuals, families, communities affected by the drug use if adequate funding is not available to implement this recommendation? As we heard today, we don't want to talk fest. We need money to follow this through. And lastly, how do we ensure that the majority of any funding allocated to the New South Wales Drug Summit recommendations finds its way to the front line? Because we've got a big industry here. When we think how many people sitting in this room, the industry sitting on top of the services that deliver to those people, whether they're in the front line in treatment, in prison or wherever, we've got to make sure some of the money gets to the front line. Thanks.
Thank you, Gar. Talking about the front line, we often talk about the pointy end of things. Ingrid, Ingrid, as many people know, is both an addiction medicine physician and a public health physician, and has done a number of things, but obviously in the context of this, you were at the 99 Summit and you became the founding medical director for the first supervised injecting facility in the English-speaking world, and certainly the first one in Australia. So I've got two questions, which you can either choose one or attempt to answer both. The first one is your service, which is now my service, and our service, ran as a trial for more than a decade, which is one of the longest running trials that we know of in the medical literature. And part of that was all about politics. And we've heard about the desire for bipartisanship, but how hard it is to get there. So the first is any reflections you have on what we physically, practically do to try and improve a coalition of the willing, if you like. And the second question relates to the public health side of things, in that in this year we have seen a failed referendum and media today about the reality of the racist impact of our current drug laws, when if you're Aboriginal, on every measure and every metric you will do worse. You're more likely to get picked up, you're more likely to get searched, you're more likely to get strip searched, you're less likely to receive a caution. So from a public health point of view, have you got any comments about what we can do to make sure that whatever policies we end up influencing, that they are rolled out fairly?
Thanks, Marianne. That's not the question you said you were going to ask.
She does very well when put on the spot.
Yeah, I just answered the question I want to answer.
Interesting question. I guess, I do want to say that the injecting centre was just one of 172 resolutions that passed through the summit. Picking up on Carmel's observation that you appreciated in the course of that 5 days just for how complex the issues and illicit drug use were, and we went in and sort of looking at other things like alcohol. So for that we really did need 5 days, I think, and incredibly successful, as I think Bob also referred to, with the backing of the bureaucracy behind us, people who I didn't know kind of existed, who were standing around the rooms in the working groups, who from one meeting to the next would turn the rambling conversations into well-crafted resolutions across that period, such that we had 172 resolutions to look at that really did cover the whole spectrum in a very sort of holistic way. That was incredibly impressive. And so the resolution, of course, that did attract the attention was the injecting room. That was the boldest, I suppose, of those resolutions. But the others were just as important. And they did go through very resoundingly by the people assembled there. There was 2 resolutions that didn't get implemented in the end. They were the resolutions pertaining to the decriminalisation of drug use and the decriminalisation of possession of a personal quantity of drugs. We've heard numerous speakers here today talking about that we need to approach drug dependence. I can further look at drug dependence as a health and social issue, acknowledging that not all drug use is by this necessarily health. And maybe it's a social issue, but not in the way that's usually meant when people say that. But we then criminalise drug use. So that is a completely contrary message. So we're saying, yes, we acknowledge this is a health issue, but meanwhile we're going to criminalise you. The resulting stigmatisation associated with that, certainly doesn't assist the lives of those people who do have problematic drug use. So I think, 23 years down the track, I think it's surely time for us to put that on the table. So I am making a pitch for that at this upcoming drug summit. And I do sometimes think or wonder about, all of the attention that the injecting room got. And as wonderful and important as that was particularly for people in the King's Cross area, it's had a huge impact on that area. But if we look more broadly, its impact is limited. Maybe at a symbolic level, yes, harm reduction. Certainly if we'd gone down, that would have affected the whole sector, and I was very, I felt that pressure as the first medical director. But, I sometimes think maybe if we could have swapped that resolution for those two that didn't actually get implemented, then now we could have had a injecting room attached to every needle syringe program in this state, depending on the appropriateness of that and depending on, whether that was supported by an local community and so on and so forth. We wouldn't be having this conversation about, the value of pill checking. Because if drugs were decriminalised or rather the use thereof, we wouldn't have all the legal hurdles that we need to jump over in order to get such a program happening, of course, on a trial basis. Let's just hope it doesn't go on for 10 years. We can't at this point in time even tell drug users that it's okay to give a needle to somebody else because, which of course is something that not only happens, but we should be encouraging, because by rights they are aiding and abetting a crime. I mean, how crazy is this? I mean, Queensland is doing this.
Have you no shame?
So I'm, answering my own question as it transpires. I think the issues of racial justice are huge, particularly when we look at drug laws. Who do they affect most? We know that Aboriginal people are very overrepresented amongst those people who are apprehended for drug use and possession. So there's a really simple one off the top that, is another good reason to stop having these crazy laws. Then we can start having an honest conversation, not just about health, but about drug use. I mean, we know every survey is telling us, more than half the population use illicit drugs. Like, this is not a sort of out there weird, thing. But everybody's sitting here pretending, oh, not me. Or I'm certainly not going to, in front of the media talk about that. So, we would also then be able to have honest conversations going to Annie's point about, the fact that drugs are used for enjoyment. Let's just be honest about these things. It's well within the spectrum of the legal drugs that we're not only okay about, but we don't even trust people when they don't use them. So yeah, that's my plug. As I say, and then I would even have swapped that one resolution that, of course, I was incredibly involved with for those two resolutions to have gone through. But it's not too late. We can catch up to Queensland.
Thank you, Ingrid. Clover, before I come to you, I'm just going to warn everybody, when we finish, I just want you to, in half a sentence, tell me if you could have one thing out of the Drug Summit, what would it be? Clover, our Lord Mayor of Sydney, longest serving Lord Mayor, also the local independent member for many years before they kicked you out. I guess a similar question in terms of the role of the independent MP. So I've often felt that I would have found it extremely difficult to do my job had we a partisan, a Labor or a Liberal member, where a politically sensitive service was. You have had, more private members' bills than anyone else, and I think, broadly regarded as being incredibly successful. And part of that, I wonder, is through that independence role. What's your advice to us and the role of the independent in helping pull some of this together?
So, Marion, I want to answer another question too.
Go for it. Yep.
I think it's the trend. So is that on?
Yep.
So I think we all understand the role of the independent. The independent can come into Parliament and can reflect where the community is at. Then the community is always way ahead of Parliament, government, and the media. And then when the independent is able to convince enough people in the Parliament to give support because the community really wants that support to happen, then we get the reforms that happen. But I just want to say I approached the the Drug Summit with absolute optimism and welcome. I had represented the area that included King's Cross and Darlinghurst for years before the Drug Summit, and that was the face of the needles. It was the face of people coming home and finding someone shooting up on their porch. It was the face of people coming out their back lane and finding young dead people. It was horrific, and so it was easy to focus on that because it was very visual. And I stood with those other people in front of the Wayside Chapel and said, "Bob, we will go ahead and do this." Anyway, the Wayside Chapel there for a moment did take on that role. And so there was a real readiness in the community that I represented to take action about this very serious problem. And I'd also been on the Joint Select Committee that was set up after the recommendations of the Royal Commission into the police, which said you should set up a safe injecting centre. And we took all the evidence. And we had those families coming in, like Tony, and telling us, describing what it was like to have lost their children or a brother. And so I had the experience in the electorate. I had all the information from the committee. The committee had even gone and visited Cabramatta and Porkies in King's Cross, and we had done all this work and research and knew absolutely that this was a thing that was really important that we should do and that was happening elsewhere, and it was very beneficial. And so, and as an independent, I really loved the Drug Summit because people were directed how to vote. And that's what was so terrific. And when the vote was called and you get the majority of people supporting what would normally have been considered in the Parliament in the 90s to be far too radical or extreme, but when they had been on the receiving end of the conversations from the families who lost their children, and when they were receiving end from people like Harry Herbert and from Alex Wodak, from Ingrid Van Beek, and hearing the real evidence, not directed by a party to vote in a certain way, but sitting in a room and getting this evidence for 5 days. It was so powerful. And then when we all voted, we voted together. Labor, Liberal, National Party, Independent, and the Health, and Newer, and we all put our hands up together, all in this one room. It was an amazing example of democracy achieving a really good outcome. And there were 172 recommendations. And why hasn't there been anything done since then? Because there hasn't been the opportunity. The Drug Summit was this amazing opportunity. I
guess that's what we're hoping for next year.
Well, I'm not doing something because we're running out of time, but I just want to say, I thought it was fantastic, and it got really good outcomes, and it can get good outcomes next year too. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody on the panel. We don't have time to ask the one thing, but I'm going to get everybody in the room to think about what's the one thing that you think is worthwhile to get out of the summit. Tracy.
Please just stay there while I do a very quick wrap, if that's all right.
We are behind time, so I will just say my thank yous very, very quickly. It's been quite extraordinary to have our panel, to have Carmel and Bob share such wisdoms, to have our members of Parliament actually speak to us, Michael, Matt, Alex. It's been wonderful. And I'm not sure if you were keeping count of the words that came up, but evidence, it was said over and over again. Outcomes, open minds, doing this together, multipartisanship. This is what lies ahead for us. And having that, as I think Carmel said, that well-designed, and Bob, doing the work now so that next year, that big word that kept coming up tonight is outcomes. So thank you so much to everyone for being here. We look forward to what's going to be achieved together in 2024 with the Drug Summit. Massive thanks, and go well.